So, as I've talked about many times here on the show, I rebranded the name of this podcast from Let's Blow This Up to Podcasting Strategy Simplified back in the early parts of 2026. And the reason that I did that was multifaceted. The biggest being that Let's Blow This Up really did not clue you in to what this show is about. And Podcasting Strategy Simplified is as on the nose as it gets. So there was a lot of visibility in play. I obviously wanted to have pieces in place for that search engine optimization, both on the podcast SEO side of things and the Google SEO side of things. But at the same time, podcasting strategy is at the root of what I do at Bombtrack Media. And as I wrap up and put together what will be the final episode in the double digits for this show, I wanted to take some time today to dive into the services that I offer. Not to just make this sound like a full-blown commercial and telling you why you should work with me, but to give you more of an in-depth look. That way, if you decide that you do want to move forward with me, you have a little bit more insight into what it's like to work with me from the strategy side, from the coaching side, and from the production side. Hello, my name is Jason Sircone, and you have found episode 99 of Podcasting Strategy Simplified. So, as I said, strategy has always been at the core of what I do. And I shouldn't say always, really what I wanted to do with Bombtrack Media. I felt like there needed to be a strong strategy element to it. And when I launched this company in late 2023, it was really under, I would say, I guess, under the mindset of doing things a little bit differently. And what I mean by that is I had been doing podcasting in a number of different facets. My business had was formerly known as Sircone Consulting. It got a little boring. Alexandra Watkins, who's appeared on the show a couple times, who I didn't work with directly, but definitely had some insight from her and read her book cover to cover. Hello, my name is awesome. She really helped me understand the power of a good brand name. And as I've mentioned before on past episodes, she was my litmus test when I did the rebrand from Sircone Consulting to Bombtrack Media. I knew if she liked what she heard, then I was onto something. And I learned from her that she liked it so much, she uses my brand as an example when she does presentations and talks to different crowds about branding and building a strong brand name. So I digress. That's really not the point of this. However, in that, my mindset was, what can we do to talk about podcasting a little bit differently? Because despite the fact that I had been in the space for a while, I hadn't focused too closely on the numbers. But what hit me one day was we've got a lot of people out there talking about podcasting in a very binary state, in that you start a show, you work real hard, you give value to your audience, you stay consistent, and eventually things are going to come together. And I don't necessarily disagree with that in theory, but there's many more layers to it. And that was what I wanted to dive into, because what I was seeing was that advice is out there, but there's also over on the other side, to the tune of 90% of podcasters aren't getting past their third or fourth episode. So if they're following this advice and then that's the result, that's a major chasm that we need to find a way to fill. Because what's the point of starting a podcast if you're only going to get to your third episode and then call it quits? Anybody that's established any sort of longevity in this game has learned that, as trite as it may sound, it's about the journey, not the destination. To pull a line from The Social Network, podcasting is never finished. I guess paraphrasing The Social Network. Podcasting is never finished. You're continuously building a catalog that speaks to past episodes, that brings new subjects to the forefront, features new voices, new insights, new perspectives. And as your audience gets invested in what you're doing, they're going to do one of two things. They're either going to keep listening to the show, or they're going to tune out and never come back again. And if you do tune somebody out or push somebody away, that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, because all that does is prove that your content isn't for everybody and it isn't for them. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what I started looking at was, how can I do things a little bit differently in regards to speaking about the overall strategy? I want podcasters, and not just podcasters. Let me redefine that, because there aren't a lot of folks that are full-time podcasters, nor do they have that ambition. This isn't about transforming yourself into being a full-time podcaster to where you are constantly on the microphone creating new content, be it in audio format, in video format, or in both. The ambition, especially for the people that I wanted to work with, was helping them understand how to leverage podcasting for their business, for their brand. That is an entirely different definition than full-time podcasting, because as it is, they already have a full-time job. You are tuning in and sitting with me today, whether you're listening or watching, and more than likely, you have a lot of responsibilities on your plate. And if you are a solopreneur, or maybe you're running a business with a few people on your team, or maybe multiple people on your team, no matter what the scenario is, you have a lot of hats to wear. So asking you, with all of these responsibilities on your plate, to say, how can I come to you and say, you know what you should do? You should start a full-time podcast. You should be creating content every week. You should be rolling this out to your audience on this ridiculously consistent schedule, and it'll be pretty easy, right? Wrong. That sounds, it's ridiculous. And that's why I think a lot of times people think about podcasting in this binary state of, this is what it is. I may listen to a couple podcasts on my way into work, or maybe when I'm at home or out walking the dog, I might put a podcast in my ear, or podcasting is that thing that Joe Rogan does. But very seldom is somebody waking up one morning and putting their feet on the floor and saying, I'm going to become a podcaster today. And I think that's where a lot of the loss in translation takes place, is because it almost is this outsider's mindset of, how could I ever be a podcaster? How could I ever use this medium to my advantage to build my business? Because I don't know anything about it. And that's where understanding the strategy behind it and how it can benefit your show is going to come into play. That's what I chose to focus on. And that's what I continue to focus on with Bombtrack Media. Because before you ever get to production, before you ever get to a point where you're creating content, you need to have a rock solid plan that sets you up for success. And your scenario could be 100% different than mine, and it could be 100% different than the next person that I speak to. Everybody's got different needs. They have different brand goals. They have different aspirations, and they have a different vision of how a podcast might be able to help their business. Now, I've said it many times. I should start a podcast, or you should start a podcast. It's the brand new, you should write a book. That used to be what everybody said, and I'm sure it still gets said in some circles. But now people say, you should start a podcast. And I remember back before I had started my first podcast back in 2015, when me and my friend Jason were talking about starting a show, that was the mindset, was, let's start a podcast. We have a lot to talk about. But we learned, like anybody else, there's a lot more to it. When you get into it, you have to be extremely targeted. You have to be extremely disciplined, and you have to know where you're going. And that's where I felt like strategy was the way to lean, because putting emphasis on this first, it helps bring clarity to the overall project. Instead of just going off generic advice of, you should start a podcast, you're actually taking time to be thoughtful with it, to think about, how would this impact my business? And answering the most important question, why? Why do I want to lean into this medium? Again, could be different for everybody. I like to reverse engineer it. And instead of saying you should start a podcast, I want to know more about your brand. And once I learned that, then I could say, here is where a podcast could plug in and be a very instrumental part in helping you accomplish the goals you've set out for. if you don't go to that extreme with it, you're going to be spraying and praying, and you're going to be creating content, hoping people show up. And when they don't, you're going to get frustrated. And it usually only takes a few episodes to get frustrated, which then leads to burnout, which then leads to pod fade. And then you're done. You're on to something else. And you never really gave it enough time to breathe. And that's one of the most important parts of podcasting. Again, I'm not just making this up. This is what the statistics say. Way too many people are pulling the plug, or way too many businesses, whoever, they're pulling the plug way too fast. And your podcast has to exist long enough for people to build trust in you. And when they build trust in you, that's when they'll start telling others they should listen to your show as well. But you can't reach that point if you're only doing a few episodes. I've spoke to people that have said, well, we'll throw a few episodes out there and see what happens. Nothing will happen. I'll save you the time of creating those few episodes. If you don't have a more long-term plan, then you're not going to get anywhere. There's enough information out there and enough content out there, and not just podcast content. Think about what you're inundated with every day. There is a lot coming at you. So in order to earn somebody's attention, you have to strategically set yourself up to be discovered. And then once you're discovered, you have to be delivering exactly what people are looking for. That's very hard to do with a ready, fire, aim approach. You can get much further and gain much more traction if you take time in the beginning to build out a strategy that then speaks to where you want to go and how the podcast can serve as the vehicle to get you there. That is the foundation on which I built Bombtrack Media. And it was one of my past clients sitting down for lunch. We were doing a strategy session, but what I discovered in that session, and it was thanks to her, she pointed this out to me. We were going over some things, and I had relayed a lot of information to her in the very beginning, and we filtered through everything. We put together what looked like a pretty good plan. But when we sat down for lunch, I realized how overwhelmed she was because she had never done this before. And that was a real eye-opener for me. I knew that strategy was what needed to lead the charge, but what I wasn't taking into consideration at that time was the fact that despite the fact that she runs a successful business, this element has never factored into it. So she's never had to put this much thought into how do I build something that's going to be special for my brand and ultimately help it go to the next level. And as she was asking me more questions, in my mind, I was saying, I think I addressed this. Did I miss this? And so finally I said, is there something that I missed? Because I feel like we talked about this in the past, but maybe it's not coming to the forefront today. And she admitted there was just so much to factor in that it was a little overwhelming, and she didn't know what she didn't know. And that's when it just hit me. I said, you know what? I think from what you're telling me, I would like to build what ended up becoming my podcast VIP strategy day. It was a system that covered every single aspect of launching a podcast, growing that podcast, maintaining it over time. So taking it from the idea of why do I want to do this, all the way through the most logical way to launch your show and continue creating content for your show that fits into your schedule. So you're not overwhelming yourself. So you're not putting yourself at a disadvantage right out of the gates. And when I said that to her, she said that would be incredibly beneficial. I wish she would have had that in place when we first started. And thanks to her, I was able to build what has become my signature strategy product or service. And that is the Podcasting Strategy VIP Day. So what this service does for you with all the working pieces in the podcast sphere, the podcast landscape, there probably are things that you're not even considering, let alone understanding. Like you didn't even know that this was something that you should think about. So what I did was take all of the knowledge that I've built over the years, from launching podcasts to managing various projects to helping with production and post-production and guest communication, making sure that all of the pieces are in place. I built what I feel is the most thorough breakdown of all aspects of that initial phase. So if you were to move into a podcasting strategy VIP day with me, the first thing that I would provide you is a podcasting blueprint. This blueprint is designed to have you answer questions that you weren't thinking about before. And it covers all aspects of the show. And it starts with why. Why do you want to do this? What do you feel you want to accomplish? What are some long-term plans? What kind of branding do you want to bring into this? Do you have any ideas for a show name? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Pretty much every factor that you could think of, it's going to be included in that blueprint. And then I take your information and I lay out what our VIP day is going to look like. The VIP day is a 4 to 5 hour strategic planning session where we'll go through each aspect of that blueprint and we will build an infrastructure that will serve as the foundation for your podcast. In doing that, we're going to be looking at content. We're going to be looking at your show description. We're going to make sure the show name speaks to your brand and to your initiatives. We're going to have content repurposing strategies laid out. Basically, everything that's going to serve as a benefit to your podcast, we are going to have that written down and in play before we ever move to production. This is going to give you a much more solid idea and much more clarity as to what you're looking to accomplish. So if you'd like to learn more about that, really where it starts is setting up a discovery call with me. You can do that at jasonsarcone.com/discovery call. I would love to dive into this more because, like I said, it's not the same for everybody. As many people as I've worked with through these VIP strategy days, I've learned that everybody's motives are different and they all walk away with different outcomes in regards to what they were expecting to go down and then what actually happened. But the one common denominator that I've heard from everybody that I've done this with is that it brought clarity to what they were about to encounter. And to me, that's the most important part of podcasting. Trying to do this blind if you've never done it before, you may think it's as easy as just turning on a camera and turning on a microphone and telling your story. And while that's a big part of it, there are many more moving parts. This part obviously is key. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. But there are a lot of pieces in place. And the most important one I haven't talked to you about yet, and that's mindset. And what I feel is absent from many podcasting strategies is a strong focus on the podcaster's mindset. And that's how I kick things off. I want to know where you're at because you may be coming into this thinking you're going to be the next Joe Rogan and it's only going to take a few episodes to get thousands of people to fall at your feet. And now it's my job to pull you back down to earth so we can talk about this like rational human beings. And I need to let you know that if you've built no audience and you're just getting started, that A, that's not going to happen. And B, it doesn't need to happen because you're not talking to a massive audience. You're talking to one person. You are talking to that one target listener or that one target viewer that is going to look at what you have to say, yep, this is the information I've been looking for. Now they can listen to more of it and they can start building trust in you. And then they can start recommending your show to other listeners that are just like them. And now you're building an audience of people that understand you, that find value in what you have to say, and ultimately will come into your ecosystem to a point to where they may patronize your business or they start referring you to others so those people can patronize your business. That's the idea here. It's not about becoming the most famous podcaster in the world. It's not about trying to become the next Joe Rogan because you can't do that. Joe Rogan's already taken. Become the first you and focus on how you can make the most of your efforts in this space. That requires a strong mindset. And I feel there is no point in starting with anything else because if your mindset is not dialed in to where it needs to be, all of the rest of the planning becomes irrelevant because we could sit down and build out the world's best strategy, but it's not going to get you overnight success. It just doesn't work that way. So helping you understand the mindset piece of this is critical. And I always build that into the very first part of any VIP day that I host. If you're looking to really zero in on this strategy and learn more about why this makes sense for your brand, start with the discovery call. Let's talk about this. I'd love to hear your ideas and we'll take it from there. Now, moving on to the coaching side of what I do at Bombtrack Media, I've got coaching services that start as low as $99 a month. The idea with coaching and consulting for me has always been that if I'm working with people that have never done this, I can't just hand them a plan and say, here you go. I feel it's my duty to take the 11 years of experience that I've accumulated in podcasting, plus the radio experience that I've had in the past, plus everything else I've done throughout my career in operations and branding and strategy and marketing. I don't want to just consider myself or label myself as a podcasting coach or a podcasting strategist. Yeah, that's fine for the marquee on the website, but what I've learned from working with others, especially ones that I've gotten into the trenches with the production side of things, and I'll get to that in a moment. But what I've learned and what I've been told is that my value doesn't just exist on the level of helping put the content together and then get it out into the world. It's the coaching that I do along the way. And that was why I wanted to put more emphasis on that within Bombtrack Media, because I know that that's one of my strengths. It's helping people understand where they're at right now, getting the ideas out of their head to formulate a plan and a strategy that allows them to move towards the goal they want to accomplish. And if little efforts each and every day are done consistently, that's going to move the needle eventually. But it comes back to mindset as well. You have to be in the right frame of mind to carry these missions out. If you feel like things are just going to happen automatically, or you see somebody on Instagram or TikTok put out this reel and they look so flawless in doing so, you've got to understand that those folks, maybe they got it on the first take, but a lot of times that's not the first thing. That's not the first cut. That's multiple attempts. Or they've spent years crafting a message and really getting good at what they do. That's something that comes from the reps. This is, talking about all of the virtues of podcasting, the talents and skills that you build from simply creating content and communicating with your audience, the way that they transfer to other aspects of your job, of your social life, of your family communication, it's so valuable. And I love the fact that I've become a better communicator simply because I've leaned into how I communicate with you when we connect for these podcast episodes. I know that I can take this skill and transfer it to how I talk to people when I'm doing these strategy days, when I'm doing coaching sessions, when I'm on a stage talking to a bigger crowd. I know that I've developed a skill set that allows me to get my message across, but in doing that, it helps you grow. It helps you learn. It helps you take these lessons, and maybe you don't apply all of them, but maybe you found one valuable nugget in the coaching that I was doing, and you take that and implement it, and it does something positive for you. That's what I care about, impacting you. You're here with me right now. I want to impact your world and your podcast. I was also trying to be very cognizant of budgets. I know that it's not the same for everyone, especially if you're just getting started and you're looking for a way to get on the right path. Maybe you can't invest in something that happens every week or every month, and that's okay. My coaching sessions are as little as, I said, $99 a month to just work with me through Voxer, and I'm happy to do that with you. Or if you'd want to move up to my VIP Accelerator program, that's a 2-week training where we dial in on a specific aspect of your podcasting strategy that you want to gain clarity on. And then we work together for those 2 weeks. And by the time we're done, you have a strategy that you can now carry out on your own, or you can continue to work with me through maybe a monthly coaching program or a bi-weekly coaching program or a weekly coaching program based on your budget and based on how much guidance you feel you need. And the favorite thing about my coaching programs is I do not put long-term contracts in play. I don't feel like I need to lock you in for a full year, because you may get the tutelage that you need in just a few months, and it's enough for you to move out on your own. Spread your wings and fly, baby. Leave the nest and start trying things on your own. And if you feel like you need additional guidance, you can always come back. But now that we've put the pieces in place, now you have more to work with. You have a more solid foundation on which to stand on. That's going to allow you to build upon everything that you want to get out of your show, and how that applies to your business and what you're going to get from it, maybe from repurposing, maybe from direct communication, maybe from networking. It's different for everybody. But that's why I love that beginning phase of finding out exactly what you want to accomplish and how podcasting could plug in versus doing it the other way. Because I don't want to just come to you and say, you should start a podcast because it's going to do all these amazing things for your business. I don't know that because I don't know what you do. I don't like throwing a blanket over all of this and saying that it's the one size fits all solution, because it's not. Going back to the strategy side of things real quickly, perhaps a normal traditional podcast, quote unquote, is not what you need. You might need an internal podcast that strengthens the communication within your company. You might need a private podcast that would be a great way for you to generate leads. You might need a series-based podcast that allows you to create content in a tighter frame, but not have to worry about being there every week. Again, these are all potential formats, but we don't know what would be best for you until we actually sit down and look at what you want to accomplish. So the coaching side of things plays into that. The strategy side of that plays into everything. One new coaching program that I just launched, it's not even really a program. It's a 90-minute mindset reset. As I mentioned before, the mindset element of podcasting is critical. And regardless of whether you're just getting started or you've been podcasting for a while and maybe not seeing what you want to see out of it, I've been there. You're probably feeling a little bit of that burnout creeping up. You're starting to question things. You're starting to wonder what you're doing wrong. You're starting to wonder if this is ever going to become what you want it to be. That's when you need to reset your mindset. If you are at a point, or you ever get to a point where podcasting is no longer fun, where podcasting is no longer something that you look forward to doing on your day-to-day schedule, and it starts to feel more like a chore or an anchor in your daily activities, that's when you need a mindset reset. Again, going to be different for everybody. But if you're feeling the burnout creeping up, I felt like putting this program together or putting this session together was a great way for you to connect with somebody who's been through it, who's got over a decade's worth of experience, and can help you navigate the troubled waters that you're trying to swim in. Mindset is something that's always going to be necessary. And of course, that transcends podcasting. But if you have negative beliefs into what you're creating, if you're looking at your content and saying, this isn't going to work, I'm not going to get anything from this, I'm just going to get an episode out so I can stay consistent and keep up with this quote unquote schedule that I have, that's going to translate into how you push your message forward. People hear that. People are going to pick up on that. That's going to do you no justice. That's going to make people believe in you less. Go through a mindset reset with me. Let's sit down. It's 90 minutes. Talk about what you want to accomplish. Where do you feel things went sideways? Where maybe it's something that you want to switch up, but you're just not sure how. Let's sit and talk. Let's start here. I think the easiest way for this, as I mentioned before, is setting up a discovery call. jasonsircone.com/discovery call. Let's start there. And again, this is a wide open conversation where you can share exactly what you want to accomplish or what you've been trying to accomplish, but just falling short of. And we'll together figure out a plan of how we can move forward. This call may end with us not working together because that call might have been all you needed. But if we really want to take the next steps forward, more than likely we're going to need to dive a little bit deeper into everything that you're looking to accomplish. But let's start with the discovery call. That doesn't cost you anything but your time. So go to jasonsircone.com/discovery call. Set that up today. The final thing I want to touch on before I wrap up is production. So this is something that I also do at Bombtrack Media. And production for me is really born, or I guess it stems from the strategy that we develop. And in producing your content, it's all based on what you need. Now, I will say that I do audio and video, but I'm also heavy into the repurposing side of things. So again, based on what you're looking to accomplish and what your goals are, specific pieces of content are going to help you achieve those goals. So maybe you need short form video clips for a stronger social media presence. Maybe you need blog posts that help with the SEO for your website. Maybe you want to build a newsletter campaign and lean into that as a complement to your podcast or a complement to everything you're doing within your business. These are all things that come into play when you create a well-curated, strategic podcast. So the production side of things all depends on what you're looking to accomplish. So I don't want to dig too deep into that, but I also want to make it very clear that I don't just hand you a plan and then say bon voyage. I'm on your side through thick and thin. If we are laying out a plan together, I want to be there to help you see it through. So let's talk about how all of this comes together. But I'm hoping in this last half an hour, what you've realized is starting with strategy is an incredibly important piece. It's why I say start with strategy, grow with clarity. There is so much value in knowing what you're in for when you're thinking about leaning into podcasting, or if you've been doing it for a while but never addressed the strategy side first. These are all elements that we can work on together to set you up for long-term success. So do not pull the plug on that podcast just yet. Or if you're in the beginning phases, do not press the record button until you've addressed the strategy first. jasonsircone.com/discovery call is where you can set things up to get the ball rolling. And I am on your side to help you grow the best possible podcast strategy to help your brand grow. Before I wind down today's show, I do want to make one quick program note. Next week, typically you'd get a quick 5-minute episode on Monday. However, because episode 100 goes live next week, I want an actual episode that's a full-blown conversation to serve as the 100th episode of this podcast. So I'm going to not put out the weekly question next Monday. The next episode you'll be getting will be next Thursday. But from there on, you'll be getting 2 episodes a week with a question kicking off the week on Monday, and then your regularly scheduled programming on Thursday. I'm looking forward to the 100th episode. I'm joined by my friends and business partners, Rich Perry and Mark Ronick. We are working together on the Empowered Podcasting Conference and building the Empowered Podcasting brand. And they'll be joining me on the show to talk a little bit about that, to talk about why it's valuable to get out and attend events so you can build your brand and learn more about the craft that you want to get better at. And of course, we'll talk about the 100th episode of Podcasting Strategy Simplified. So make sure you are joining us for that. And I look forward to connecting with you when that episode rolls out. So that's going to do it for today. My name is Jason Sircone. This has been Podcasting Strategy Simplified, episode 99. Until our paths cross again, remember, podcasting isn't easy, but it doesn't need to be complicated. I'll see you next time.